Hi everyone. Let's just make sure that you can hear me okay. How's everyone? Welcome to episode 164. I've got a whole bunch of projects to catch you up on, so that's what we are going to spend our time doing today. I've got a new microphone, as you can see. Normally I don't have one actually clipped onto my body, but Mike and I wanted to just see what you guys thought, so any feedback would be great. We have figured out that there's filters in OBS that almost like create like a background hum. So we're going to work on that over the next few weeks, so over the next couple of weeks, and just see if we can figure that out. So welcome. It is Sunday, August 23rd. Mike and I are actually celebrating our 13th wedding anniversary on Tuesday. So we won't be able to go out on Tuesday proper. James has tutoring, but we're going to be going, we're hoping to go out for dinner one night this week and do something. Maybe instead of going out for dinner, we'll go for a walk. I'm not really sure. Anyways, 13 years. We've been together for 15. So it's really exciting. Yeah, if it's a little bit soft, Diane, can you turn up your volume at your end and just let me know? Because I don't want to change the gain and change any settings, but that's really helpful to know. So thank you. I'll talk a little bit louder. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We've got Kelly and Sonia and Deanna and Diane and Rebecca, Laureline, Glenda, Janine, Wendy. It's just so good to see you guys. We've got Dagmar here and Eve, Megan. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. Let me, since you guys are all saying, yeah, I know it's got that like a little bit of like a far away sound. So let me just pop up a little bit and you guys can let me know what you think. So tell me how that is and then let me know. Yeah, so if you're, thank you, you guys. Hopefully that's a little bit better. My gain has gone up a little bit, so hopefully you guys are better. Thanks, you guys. Thank you for being patient and sort of for navigating this with me. There's a background hum, so that's what Mike and I are trying to fix. And we've tried, like honestly, we've tried so many things. So yeah, that's great. Thanks, you guys. So we've got some stuff to talk about. I've got a pile of stuff here to chat with you guys about. I know the joys of technology, you're right, Eve. It's been kind of a crazy week here. So this was the last week that the kids were sort of home with no structured stuff. We just kind of had a fun week. So if you sent me a message or if you were looking for a response, no matter what I did, I could not get onto the computer. So I was really sporadic about checking Slack. I was really sporadic about checking Patreon. So if you're looking for a response from me, I will get to you probably tomorrow. The kids are starting camp tomorrow for a week. They go every year. They've completely redesigned it for this year so that the kids can go, and they're so excited. So that'll be really great. And then the week after, we're camping for 5 days. So again, it'll be a little bit sporadic, and then we'll be into the fall in some sort of routine. So I'm just kind of waiting to see what that'll look like. So yeah, I just really appreciate your patience and recognizing that this last 7 months has been completely atypical for all of us, and I feel like we're sort of figuring it out over here a little bit. So yeah, we finished up our yarn substitution content. So this month everything went live, and we're sort of wrapping that up. And next month, How I Spin will sort of be back to the way it was before, with a couple of changes and a couple of tweaks. So if you're looking for that content, you can look in the show notes, which are linked down below. There's links for the trailer and the intro and in the index. And if you're looking for some of those links, don't hesitate to reach out to those of us in the community, myself, or someone else that you feel comfortable reaching out to. The How I Spin a Sock Study is available if you want to go to the Blurb website and order yourself an actual physical copy. The links are in the show notes. And for Unbraided, the book that me and Katrina wrote together, there's links in the show notes as well. So for August, for our community participation, go to the episode thread, which is here. I'll link it for you guys in the live chat so that you can pop over and do that right now. I'm asking you to tell us about your biggest accomplishment in spinning. So not necessarily your favorite spin, but what has been your biggest accomplishment? And I've been really enjoying reading through what people have been saying. I'm not sure what I'm going to mail out yet. I had a really generous offer from someone in our Patreon community to actually sponsor somebody to come on board with Patreon, and that she would pay their sort of first month, if you will. So I'm just trying to figure out what that would look like and how we might be able to do that. So I don't know if that'll be the giveaway for August, or if I'll send out another Frisian bat, or maybe some Shetland. Trying to figure it out. So we have an absolutely packed chat. It's funny, Diane, because you just said, wow, so many people here today. And I was just going to say the same thing, like chat is moving so quickly that it's actually a bit hard to keep up. So I'm just over the moon. Thank you so much, you guys. I really, really appreciate it. So let's run the credits, and we'll get into the show. I've got a finished object, which you can see, to chat about behind me. I've got a whole bunch of little bits and pieces to talk to you about. And we've got some community participation to share with you, and some spinning from our amazing community members. So stay tuned. So I think somebody got a new wheel. Wendy says it's my first modern wheel, the first DT. So Wendy, did you, oh, that's so excited. So she says, so excited. I just drove 7 hours and collected a Lendrum DT. Oh my goodness, Wendy, congratulations. That's awesome. So, oh, and Miriam and Elsie are here. So Miriam is one of our long-term community members. She's also a really good friend of mine. And she just had a little girl, and she won last month's giveaway, which was so great because, you know, newborn baby stuck at home, something fun to spin. And she's here today. So welcome, Miriam. Just really, or Mowry, really great to see you here. Awesome. That's so great. Oh, I love it when there's great things happening in our community. Little bit of housekeeping for our community, community participation. So book club, I'm just going to quickly mention that we are currently reading Emma for our Jane Austen book club, and we are also doing How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and those two groups meet separately. So for Ibram's book, we are meeting on Wednesdays, I think twice a week. Is that right, Becca? I know that she's in the chat. And for our Emma discussion group, we are meeting on Fridays. So the last one was this past Friday on the 21st. And dates are in the Slack channel under the hashtag books channel. So if you are not a part of that, but you're in the Slack community and you're part of the Patreon community, on your left-hand side of your screen, if you're on a mobile app, just press the plus button and search the channels for hashtag books. I'm really enjoying both books. For Emma, for me, is a reread. I've read it a billion times, and actually I have to admit, the movie with Alicia Silverstone, Clueless, is based on Emma, and they were talking about that in the Slack channel, and I actually was like, okay, it's on Netflix right now. I'm gonna watch it one evening this week when I maybe magically get a little bit of time to myself. So I'm really looking forward to that. Becca just rewatched Clueless this week, so that's fantastic. So Emma, the next Emma meeting is September 4th. And the anti-racist group is deciding on their next book currently. So that's great. Let's do breed and color studies. Actually, I have to admit, I was reading, I haven't quite finished How to Be an Anti-Racist yet. I'm like, I'm about 80% of the way through. And I was reading it yesterday at work, and because it was one of those days, and I was reading it, and I was so intent on what I was reading that somebody came up, one of our clinical resource nurses came up, and she's like, are you reading or are you playing a game? Because I was like, I was on my Kindle. And I said, no, I'm reading. And she's like, wow, you are really intent. I was like, yes, I am. I didn't want to get into what I was reading because we were just ramping up. The unit was just getting busy. So I put it away and the rest of the day went like that. So, all right, breed and color studies. So our breed and color studies were up and running. Things are going along tickety-boo. I wanted to share with you Helena's skein. So Helena said this is her skein here. I'm going the opposite way, sorry you guys. She took the plunge last weekend. She split her bat in half and she spun it in a gradient. She's ended up with a 2-ply fingering weightish yarn. She hasn't checked the wraps per inch yet, and she found this fiber really nice to spin, and she's looking forward to finishing off this weekend. Well done, Helena. So this is what the bat looks like. So she split it in half. I'm assuming that she probably split it, opened it up, and then split it horizontally so that she would have 2 halves, and then she plied them together, and she did a beautiful job. And of course, this is the photo that Greta shared with us. So the warmest row on Ravelry and Slack. And she, Katrina took that photo, and then this was the inspiration and what she ended up creating. So that's just awesome. I realized that I've got the camera mirrored. So I'm looking this way to actually look at my monitor that's over here, but you guys are seeing the opposite. So I'm gonna have to mirror the monitor. I'm gonna have to remember to do that. So if I say it out loud to you guys, when I'm looking at this later and adding the timestamps, I'll remember. There is a method to my madness. We have cast off for our Made with Love Along, which was an opportunity this past spring through our sort of global pandemic to lift up those in our community and honor them and do what we do best. So, and to get creative. Rebecca and I are chatting this week, and we will be figuring out prizes and whatnot, and I will hopefully be able to do that and award those prizes next show. So that will be the last show of August. Because her and I were sort of delayed in connecting because I was away, and we were just trying to figure out when we could actually get together to actually chat and go through all that. If you have finished your Made with Love Along project and you felt like you couldn't submit in the finished objects thread because it was like past July 31st, go ahead and put it in the FO thread, because I know there's a couple of people that had said in the chatter thread, oh, it's past the date, so I'm not putting this in the FO thread. Do it. Like, just put it in. If you're a few days over, a week, 2 weeks, put it in there. And I will hopefully be awarding those prizes on Sunday next week. All right. Just finished my singles for Breed and Color Study last night. That's awesome, Megan. I can't wait to hear see what you created. And Emma with Gwyneth Paltrow is one of my top 5s. Yes, and actually one of my other top 5s is Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley. I love that movie. Let's see what else are you guys saying. Mari says she didn't get a chance to participate, but she found How to Be an Anti-Racist to be an interesting read, and she's curious to see what's next. I know we've been chatting quite extensively in the book channel to figure out what we're going to do next. So I'm excited to see what you guys want to do. I know Me and My White Supremacy is by Layla Said, I think, has been mentioned a couple of times. I know there's quite a few people in our community that are reading that on their own. And of course, there's such a long list of books for us to choose from. So it'd be really good. Love the yarn color. It has lovely depth to it. Oh, it's so good to see you. See, it's so much enthusiasm this morning. So thank you so much. So Zero to Hero, I wanted to share this. And because Megan is here today, I'm even happier. So Megan has been working on this epic cloth project, and I'm so excited to share this with you. So the Zero to Hero is something that we've been doing in our community. It lasts all year and it'll roll into next year. So don't worry if you don't get it done this year. Basically, it's an opportunity to go from spinning to knitting to a finished object, or spinning to weaving to a finished object. It's an opportunity to go all the way through the process and have a community of people behind you supporting you. So Megan says, and I've linked everything in the show notes, so if you want to go to the Zero to Hero and see what people have been working on, it's all there for you. So Megan, who's Likey Meg, and here in the chat, she's Puddle Gum, shares, this is my Serendipity meets Marie Wallen skirt. I loved the idea of mixing weaving and knitting. The yarns are brown sheep spun sport is the main brown color, so that's the commercial yarn that she used. The other colors are either Palette, which is Knit Picks Palette, or Jameson's Spindrift. The woven panels are done in plain weave on my rigid Heddle loom. The knitted panels are the pattern from Mousa by Marie Wallen in her book Shetland. I used sew-on snaps to secure this wraparound skirt. I put a little piece of bias tape behind them on the wrong side so they didn't poke through the cloth. I cut the weaving and secured the edges with bias tape. These were both amazing patterns to combine into something warm, wearable, and comforting. So really, really amazing. I actually had the opportunity to talk with Megan about this project, about her epic cloth project. I don't know that this is actually her epic cloth because I know that she was doing some other stuff for epic cloth as well. But I know that this was one of her projects that she's been working on for a really long period of time and sharing with us and talking about in our group. And to see it finished is just amazing. So if you want to know more about this project that Megan has been working on, in the index, and I'll actually link it for you now so that I don't forget, Megan and I had an opportunity to chat on the other podcast that we produce, which is Woolen Spinning Radio. And her and I chatted this past month. So for those who are patrons and aren't caught up with Woolen Spinning Radio, I'll put the link in the live chat for you guys, and you can hear a little bit more about Megan's conversation with me about this project. So really, really amazing, really cool. I love the colors in the knitting actually. That slow fade of the yellow to the blue in the colorwork section of the skirt, it just warms my heart. Love it. And Megan works these colors. Megan and I have very similar coloring, as you can see from our hair, and the colors that Megan often chooses are colors that I'm drawn to, and so to see somebody else working in my color palette is always really nice. Oh, and she said the vest that she's wearing she's giving to her mom for Christmas, but she really likes it with the skirt, so she might change her mind. That's fantastic. Skirt is stunning. The hand knit top on top is amazing. And then people are asking some questions about some of the actual, like what Megan did. So that's fantastic. Diane says, sorry, Mom. I was just going to say hashtag sorry, not sorry. I had one more thing to share from Sharon, and I just realized that I didn't actually get it put in here. I think I did, but I didn't write up what Sharon wrote. So this was something from Sharon that I wanted to share with you. It was a finished project. Let me just find it and then I'll fix it in the show notes for you guys because I really wanted to share this with you from Sharon. So this was a spinning growth that she shared, and this is from Frog Stitch. So she put this in spinning growth because she intended this to be her Zero to Hero project for this year, but she learned so much from it that she is putting it in the spinning growth thread. So spinning growth is an opportunity for us to share with one another some of our learnings and some of our projects that maybe didn't go quite as smoothly as we had hoped, and they're opportunities for us to reflect and to learn and to sort of talk about some of the things that maybe didn't go quite as swimmingly as we thought, but not to criticize or to say, well, that was an epic fail. It's an opportunity to grow and to learn, because that's how we grow and learn and how we push out of our comfort zone. So Sharon says she carded up. So this is a Shetland wool naturally dyed at a class that she took several years ago. She carded it up and tried to put the row legs in succession to make a gradient. She did not always achieve that perfectly, and she learned that the row leg form from the light hits it. Sorry, I learned that in the row leg form, the light hits it differently, so hits the fiber, the Shetland, differently than when it is compacted in the spinning. She learned how to chain ply because she wanted to keep the colors running in sequence and avoid barber poling. In hindsight, I would have extended my yardage by doing a 2-ply, even with breaking the bobbin when the colors stopped lining up and wasting some yarn. So what that is, intentional plying like that is where you, as you're plying, so let's say you're applying a traditional 2-ply or you're applying for a traditional 3-ply, if the colors stop matching up and you don't want that color twisting or that barber poling, and you want your colors to match up more perfectly, quote unquote, you can actually break your singles and pull those singles off of your bobbins and get rid of them until the colors match up again, and then you keep on plying. So it's just one way of matching up your colors without chain plying. Stocking stitch also would have made the shawl bigger. It is quite small, more like a shawlette. So you can see here that it was a garter stitch that she chose. So garter stitch tends to it takes a little bit more rows to sort of create fabric than it does in stockinette. The biggest disappointment is the harshness of the wool. I'm not sure if it was a lower quality of Shetland or was ruined in the dyeing, but it was a bit brittle and crunchy in the carding. Even soaking the skeins with hair conditioner did not alleviate the coarse texture. And the main takeaway for me is that you can't ever have a finished project that will be better than the quality of wool going into it. Really, really great comment, Sharon. Very profound for those who are sort of first starting out. If you start off with fibers, whether it's wool or otherwise, that are difficult to work with, or you're struggling with, or not very good quality, or are brittle or crunchy or coarse, any number of things, you can't fix that in the knitting. You can maybe fix it a little bit in the spinning. It's challenging, but with sampling and trying to figure it out, you maybe can. But unfortunately, you can't fix it completely, and that's where sampling comes in. If I spin it this way, will it change the nature of the fiber? If I spin it this way, will it change the nature of the fiber? Will it sort of mask that problem a little bit? And if the answer is no every single time, then you may want to look, decide whether or not you want to continue or not. Or you accept that that's the situation and you continue knowing that you maybe will have to make some adjustments as you go, like she mentioned about the conditioner, or spinning something a little bit more softly or a little bit harder to compensate, but knowing that you won't have that really, really perfect finished object. So I think that's really, really a great comment that Sharon makes. The main takeaway for me, okay, so I had even entertained the idea of frogging it and knitting it over in stocking stitch, but alternating the hand spun with rows of a comparable grist black alpaca. So like doing like 2x2 striping kind of idea. I love the look of the Amish quilts with the black backgrounds, which make the colors sing. Absolutely. But with over 2 dozen, I don't know what SQ, 2 dozen SQ of yarn in my stash, I need to just call it a day and move on. 2 dozen, I'm not sure what SQ means. I'm sure it's like a lot of yarn in your stash. So just like liver, no matter what you do with it, it still tastes like liver. That's true, Diane. Sweater quantity, thank you, Becca. But with over 2 dozen sweater quantities of yarn in my stash, I just need to call it a day and move on. I've never seen SQ as sweater quantity before. That's brilliant. Thanks, you guys. All right. I used that's about the skirt. So Megan's just answering some of the questions in the chat about her skirt. So thank you so much, Megan, for doing that. So I will pop this spinning growth into the show notes because I realized as I was recording with you guys that it never made it in. So let's chat about my finished object, and we'll go back to the main view, and I'll just turn off the webcam for just a sec. So this is Always in My Heart by Isabel Kraemer. I'm actually really shocked that I finished this, and I think the name of the show this week, because I didn't think that this would be done, I think I had ended up calling it Catching Up on Projects, but I may change it to Always in My Heart FO, just so that when people are looking through the names of the shows, they know sort of what we talk about. So this is Always in My Heart by Isabel Kraemer. So I used 2 different yarns, as you can see. The blue yarn is one of Katrina's new, if I move this, we may lose connection, but I will reconnect immediately. So just bear with me here. I was able to do it without technology. So this is actually one of Katrina's new colorways this year. It's Ocean. And I used the Tough and Tender base, which was actually the same base that I used for my Stone Crop pullover. And I used the Jungle colorway. It was that gorgeous jungle green kind of color. So this is Ocean, and I used the entire skein. I'm not actually sure if I have the leftovers here. I meant to grab them out. So this is all I had left. I did actually knit another row, and I got through the row at the bottom here, and then I tried to knit back and I couldn't do it. So I had to tink back and untink the row that I tried to stretch the yardage for. If I had been able to get through and I'd gotten to like here on the wrong side, I was just going to sub in another yarn and finish up the last little bit, but I was actually only at midpoint. So I tinked back and then tinked back and started the ribbing. And then this is all I have left of the hand spun. So the hand spun was also one of Katrina's colorways in Pasuta, and this is Targi Bamboo Silk in her Pasuta colorway, and I spun this as a 3-ply fractal. It was quite high twist. I spun it on my Ashford e-spinner, and it was the first skein of yarn that I spun after I got it. And I have to admit, as I was knitting with it, I had a couple of reflections. When you're breaking in a new wheel and you're sort of getting used to it again, because I had an e-spinner in the past. I'd had a Hanson, which I moved on to my friend Lynn Anderson of West Coast Color, and I had an Ashford e-spinner, which I also moved on, and then I ended up with one again, and it's been awesome to just drag it around the house and spin on it. And I got a battery pack for it this time. I was smart. But the first skein off of that wheel, it wasn't as consistent as I was hoping. And so as I was knitting, I noticed that just overall, you know, getting used to the wheel again and kind of, you know, playing around with it a little bit, the 3 singles are all a little bit different. So when I was looking at these slipped stitches along here, like here's one right here, which you probably can't see, but I can see, there's a big chunk of silk. And I may actually try to pull some of that out. But it's just, it's interesting to me that as we're sort of getting used to a new wheel, or we're coming back to a wheel after a really long time, that sometimes our spinning isn't quite as consistent as we would hope. So, and then the Tough and Tender base is a Targi nylon sock base. So it's quite a round yarn. It's got a lot of twist in it. It's fantastic for socks. And I had originally knit these 2 yarns up into what I hoped was going to be the Velour by Andrea Mowry, and it was just very stiff, no drape, way too much structure, and I pulled it out and ended up with this much left over for this quite lovely size shawl. So I had hoped to do the large size, but I think I ended up with somewhere in between. I never did count my stitches before I went on to the ribbing. But the large size, there's 2 sizes, small and large. For the large shawl, you finish up the color work and then you actually work the ribbing in the main color. For the small shawl, you work the color work section, this mosaic knitting section, and then you work the ribbing in the contrast color, which here was my hand spun. And the nice thing about that is it basically uses up all of the 2 yarns, whereas if you do the large size, you need a second skein of the main color. And I didn't want to use a second skein. I do have a second skein of this Ocean, but I'm going to give it back to Katrina. So one of the reflections about this project that I was going to make was, it was really funny. So I was knitting, let me show you how big this shawl is, because the small is actually quite enormous. So let me hold it out. I'm going to back up Diana. so that I can get a little bit of space. So from the midline out to the corner is basically a wingspan from my shoulder all the way out. And sorry if that muffled the mic a little bit. And the eyelet section is quite large. So as the eyelets are being knit, I actually started to feel like they just would absolutely never end. But then when I started the mosaic section, all of that slipped, all those slipped stitches on both sides when you're working the main color and one row when you're working the hand spun or the contrast color. It really goes quickly, but you're working a lot of stitches. And then when I got down to the ribbing, it went like that. It was done so quickly. Like I knit it one afternoon when I was over at my mom's with the kids. It went super fast. So it was funny. In some ways, this shawl felt like it would never end. And then all of a sudden it was just done. So I didn't pay any attention to how deep the ribbing was. I just kept knitting until I ran out of yarn, basically. I didn't want to get into a situation where when I got to the bind off that I would run out of yarn. So when I sort of felt like I was sort of at a point where I was ready to cast off, and I had just that little bit of yarn left, which I think has fallen on the floor somewhere, I just decided to cast off and move on. So I'll put it on for you so that you can see, and hopefully it doesn't affect the mic too much. But it's a nice size. It's perfect. So this to me is like the perfect shawl. I'll have to fix my hair in a sec. So it's the perfect size. It's not too big. It's not too small. And it's just got like a really lovely sort of feel to it. The yarns ended up draping really nicely. I think the fact that the shawl is actually knit on 4mm needles for the eyelet section, and then for the mosaic section down here, you actually go up a needle size. And so the yarn, because there was no drape, or there wasn't any particular drape when it was knit on a smaller gauge, and it was very stiff, and I had like it needed to be knit at a more open gauge. So, and then of course, because the pasuta, I spun it as a fractal, I really wanted to preserve that fractal, like I wanted to be able to show that when I'm chatting with hand spinners or when I'm teaching, to say like, this is how a fractal is going to knit up. And I think that this project, because that was why I wanted to knit the Velicourt, it was only so that you could see the movement of the fractal. And I think this really did a good job, because you can see where you've got the blue as the background, and then you've got brown as the background, and then you're back to the blue as the background, but then you've got the movement of the other colors through it and how that happens. When Rebecca was here back in March, we talked quite a long time about this sort of layering effect that you get when you spin fractals. So if you're interested in sort of getting into that a little bit more and sort of learning a little bit more about that, I would recommend that you go back to that episode. And I'm actually not sure what number that was, but it was back in March. So yeah, thank you so much, you guys. Beautiful shawl. It's going in my queue. Yeah, it is perfect for hand spun. Dana, you're absolutely right. Love blue and brown together. Absolutely, Megan. It's one of my favorite combinations. Oh, that's so funny. Kids are doing artwork. Martha really wanted to type that. That's so cute. Targhee is much less. I found Targhee holds up better than merino. Probably depends on the source. I find Targhee's more, it's a harder wearing fiber. So Eve, great question. Is Targhee more hard wearing? Because Targhee has that, what are the breeds that make up Targhee? I think it's Corriedale and Merino. I can't remember. It's just got that longer staple. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit tougher. Yeah, no criticism at all, but is there a reason you just You didn't just knit the Velacor at a different gauge. Yeah, so Rebecca, great question. I was going to, that was actually my plan. I was going to rip it out, take out the additional ease, do another gauge swatch and figure out what it would be on a looser needle and completely modify the pattern and re-knit it. But we were right at the like we were within a few weeks of leaving on our trip, and I wanted to take this on our trip, whatever that project was going to be, and I just felt really crunched for time. And you know how as soon as you feel kind of stressed or kind of pressured about something, you just start to shut down and be like, oh, this is like feeling like a bit too much. I just decided to scrap it, and I actually would really still like to knit the sweater, just in different yarns, which is actually part of what I was going to talk about today. So that is a really great pivot, Rebecca. I haven't shared a recent 51 yarns with you, so I thought that I would actually do that with you today, but it's my 51 yarns. So we've been working through 51 yarns for the last almost 2 years for Group A, and Group B is halfway through their first year. And for September, there is just an inordinate amount of spinning. So I actually sort of wish that I had broken up September. So for those who are in Group A for 51 yarns and are actually participating, you might want to have a look at the calendar for 51 yarns, and you might want to start spinning or allow it to kind of go into October because it's a big month. So I was thinking about the Velacor, and I was thinking about these yarns that I've been spinning and that I've sort of been working through. And I actually went back to this project again because the Velacor calls for light fingering. And so these two yarns here is a 2-ply Shetland and a 2-ply BFL that I spun years ago, and I really wanted to combine them too. And I was looking at shawls, and I was looking at it like a Shetland shawl, you know, something knit on like 3.25 millimeter needles, or maybe 3.5s at the top end, because they're both quite finely spun. They're light fingerings, and I can make more of this. This is my Disdero Ranch 100% Shetland, and it's just a 2-ply traditional. This is one of the bobbins I've been working on to spin more for my Albini sweater that I've been working on, and sort of semi-woolen spun. It's from a pin drafted roving. Anyways, I don't know if I have enough for the Velacor, but I thought that I would skein this one up, like ball it up, and I'll do a little gauge swatch because my plan is to actually combine these two for that sweater. And I think it would be really neat to start at this darker end at the bottom of Velacor. Hang on. At the bottom of Velacor, because it's kind of got like this green quality to it, and then it'll work up to the lighter end of the skein. So out here is quite a bit lighter than the bottom, so you'll see that movement of color, because basically what I did with this skein, or this braid of it was on the round BFL. I basically took the braid and I just stripped it vertically all the way down, and I just spun end to end. So really, really easy spin, and one of my favorite yarns that I've ever made. And I was trying to figure out like how could I showcase it, because I think I have been talking with you guys about possibly cabling it. So I was going to combine the two yarns. I was going to put it back through the wheel, add a whole bunch of twist, and then cable them together so that it would make a 4-ply cabled yarn like that. But I don't love it, the idea of doing that, because I love the look of this 2-ply. Like, I just love the subtleness of it, the gentleness of it. I just think it's such a pretty yarn. So the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I don't think so. So that's actually on my list this week, is to swatch for that and to see what I end up with. And if this just ends up being a project that's kind of, you know, a little bit slower, lots of knitting. It's a very knit heavy, knit intensive sweater. The other thing I was thinking about was actually doing a shifty with these yarns and swatching for that. And because I have more than enough yardage of this, just this yarn for the, and not alternating skeins or having multiple skeins, but just having this through the mosaic knitting of that sweater. And the Shetland would be the main color. So lots of options, Lots of stuff. There's so many patterns out there. It's just like unbelievable. So this is my Albini swatch. It's the 100% Shetland. And I have been spinning up my bobbins because the Queries and Explorations group were hoping to talk about woolen plying on Sunday next week. So these are 2 bobbins. I'm hoping to beef this one up a little bit this week. And I was stuck at work one day and I didn't have a project to work on. And I had this little sample of 3-ply that I had done. And I also had a bigger sample of 3-ply. So I skeined it up by hand. Just sat there in the truck and skeined up the yarn. And I cast on for Albini. So I have been steadily and busily knitting up this sweater in the background. And of course, do as I say, not as I do. Spin all of your yarn for your sweaters before you cast on. But you know, when you're in that situation where you want to work on something, you've got, I had an hour and I didn't have enough yarn for my other projects. I'd left it at home by accident. And so I cast on. So I'm just halfway through the yoke of Albini. And actually, I'll just throw this over me so you guys can see. I'll stay away from the mic. I'll show you on this side of me. So you pick up and knit the collar afterwards. So this is sort of where I'm at with this sweater right now. So I'm building out the front of the sweater. I've just started working straight for the front. And I've been really working on this week to get the singles done to ply to be able to continue knitting. So this is another project like my shore cardigan right here on the dress form that we talked about last show in episode 163. I really don't want to have a whole bunch of leftover yarn. I only want to spin the sweater quantity that I need for this project. So I'm sort of going to do a little bit of knit, spin, and just make sure that I've got enough for the project. And then if I need more singles for this project, whatever this project ends up being, whether it ends up being a shifty or a Bellecour, I've got both patterns I'll spin a little bit more for that project. I just don't, I'm really trying to use what I have and not end up with a whole bunch of extras. So yeah, you guys are talking about the Targhee. So yeah, Targhee comes from Rambo. Oh, that's right, Rambouillet, Lincoln, and Corriedale. So it's just that little bit toothier, a little bit more substantial than merino in a different way. It's hardier. That's a great word, Megan. It's hardier. It's a little bit longer stapled. It's very poofy, very squooshy. It's got those Rambo characteristics in it. It was made specifically with Rambo Rams crossed with Corriedale and Lincoln Rambo U's. So yeah, really great. Really great fiber. We did Targhee as our breed and color study in the summer of, was it 2017 or 2018? I feel like it was 2018 we did Targhee. So yeah, so 51 yarns. All of this stuff that I've been spinning up for 51 yarns for September, like I said, it's going to be a heavy month. We're looking at Bast fibers and pet fibers. And in hindsight, I should have broken those two up. The problem was I was trying to fit it all into 24 months. So, and we really actually needed more like 26 months. And, but now we know, hindsight's 2020. So very, very heavy spinning for September. So I wanted to just chat very quickly about my yarns, because usually I don't share what I'm working on. It's part of the teaching content, and it's also part of the Thoughtful Spinner content. But this month was so intense and there was so much spinning that I really wanted to share it with you. So these two skeins here, and actually Eve, I see your question, I'll answer it in just a sec. These two skeins here are dog fiber. It was Samoyed that was gifted to me from one of our Patreons, from Candy. And I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I am a dog lover. We've always had dogs. I don't know what it is. I just, the thought of spinning dog fiber just makes my skin crawl. I don't know why. It's completely irrational. I have no idea why that's the case. but it just, I don't know, I've got a mental block about it. So I did spin this little skein of 100% Samoyed. It's very fuzzy, lots of halo. It was really difficult to spin. Drafting the fibers apart, it's not like spinning wool, it's not like spinning alpaca or cotton. It was a very different experience. So what I did with the other half was I did a blend. So this is Polworth mixed with Samoyed. Way better. And what I thought was so interesting about this skein was that it almost has like a blue tinge to it. So really interesting. When I hold it up here, I don't know that you can really see it, but it's got this sort of blue quality to it, which I thought was really interesting. I washed them both the same way. They're both spun the same way. But yeah, it's just that blend that, I think it was a 50-50 blend. Yeah, 50-50 Polworth Samoyed, drafted very nicely compared to the 100% Samoyed. Yeah, it's got this kind of blue tinge to it. So you can only see it when it's next to another yarn. So when it's next to the very white Samoyed, you can see the blue-gray, kind of a blue-gray tinge, which I thought was really interesting. The other fiber that we were spinning this month was the Bast fibers. So these are my 100% Raimi yarns. This one, and I did a very, very low twist on it. So this one was a bobbin that I had spun quite a lot of Raimi on, and just getting used to the fiber. I was really just playing. I wasn't going for any specific quality of Raimi. And of course, it's got this lovely drape. It hangs beautifully. It's spun a little bit thicker than I would have wanted if I was going to do something with it, but eventually I would like to spin up enough to do a woven project with. So this was sort of an opportunity for me to just kind of see how that would go. And I'll hang on to this for sort of a sample for down the road. And because I will sort of do that project when I'm sort of ready to take that on. And then this littler skein of Raimi was playing with a lighter, a lower gauge. So lace weight, finely spun, and just playing with some different ways of drafting it. Short forward, short backward. I wasn't concerned about spinning the whole little sample skein the same way. And then I think I talked about this on the podcast before. This was 50-50 Shetland Raimi. So this was some fiber that I had. It was a little bundle that I had from Disdero Ranch, and I carded it up. And this has just beautiful drape. This would actually, if I might make some more of this actually and make a second skein. This would be an incredible shawl. It's got just this gorgeous drape, this lovely heathering of the white Raimi with the gray Shetland. And I think this would take the dye really beautifully. You could either do a dye that goes to the cellulose-based fibers, or you could do an acid dye that goes to the wool fibers, the protein fibers, or you could do a natural dye and mordant it with both, so that the natural dye goes to both the cellulose and the protein fibers, but they would take the color differently. So kind of keeping that in the back of my mind, because if I do a little bit more of this fiber, this was the 50-50. So it's, Romney, sorry, I said Shetland, I meant Romney. Romney Raimi, it's very planty feeling. It's got a real planty quality to it, but I really like it. And it's sort of a sport weight. It would make a really nice shawl. And if you combine this with another yarn, this natural kind of heathering would really, I think it would enhance another skein of hand spun, depending on what you chose. So Kelly says, I saved a bit of my old dog's fur, which I will blend with something else when I finally catch up. I have the same block. It really makes me heave. I have a great dog Kiviat blend, but I washed it really well in an opaque laundry bag before I even looked at it. So you guys are equally grossed out. I am so glad. I am not the only one. So Eve was wondering what I do with all my little sample skeins. I keep them. So all of these little samples, these ones in particular, I keep them for teaching. So when we are able to teach in person again, this stuff does eventually go into teaching content. So a lot, like for in person. And one of the things that I've kind of been working on in the background behind the scenes, just on my own, is when we have a huge amount of content that we release that's all kind of on one theme, like we just did the yarn substitution content, for example, I put all of that together after the fact so that it could be a standalone in-person workshop. So if we ever got to the point on Patreon where we actually were having in-person workshops where I was maybe traveling to see you guys and to actually be there in person in a small workshop, like let's say I came to London, England, and we rented out the back of a classroom in a knitting shop for a weekend kind of thing, and we did one day was a spin-in, just getting together, socializing, having just a fun day, and then the next day we did like a 6-hour workshop based on some like specific content. I would pull from all of this stuff. So if you guys wanted to, if there was 10 participants and you guys wanted to do like a workshop on, bast fibers, pep fibers, and spinning cotton, I would just bring all my samples. Or if you wanted to do a workshop on twist, and we spent a day talking about twist, and we maybe spun from 9 to 12, took an hour for lunch, and then did 1 to 3, all of these samples would come with me, and that's kind of what it would look like. So I keep all of this stuff, and I actually keep it all categorized, organized, labeled, all of it. I keep it really, really organized. Yeah, come to Cornwall. Yes, I would love to come back to Cornwall. I've been to Cornwall a couple of times. So part of the travel cost though would be part of the Patreon stuff, and it would be part of like the me coming, like it would all be kind of part of. If we were at a point where we were at that level of community participation where there was that sort of once a year, there would be that travel, that would be part of what, part of the sort of the structure and the tiers of Patreon. And then those who wanted to participate in the workshop, there would be like some workshop fees or some materials fees or whatever. So yeah, I've got kind of in the back of my mind, I've kind of got an idea of sort of how it would work. And then it would be a matter of sort of figuring out the logistics. And many of these places like England, I've been to a lot, because of course my dad's from the south of England. And there are some, traveling in the off season, all those different things that you can kind of figure out and do to make it work. So yeah. So I have to tell you guys, because you guys are all excited now. Yeah, tell your friends, people, sign up your spinning friends. Let's get that number up. Thank you, Diane. That's very kind. Oh, thank you, Becca. The funny thing is that so I have to tell you guys, because it ended up not happening because of the COVID. So in April, there was the Fibre Festival in Bristol. Was it? No, it wasn't in Bristol. It was in Wales. And Erica and I had actually planned and organized for me to come, and it was going to be a surprise. And of course, with everything, I ended up not being able to do it and follow through. But there was going to be kind of we were going to do a bit of a surprise, her and I. So one day we will get back to some sort of ability to travel one day. So yeah, we were gonna, I think it was Wonderwool. It was the one in Wales, back in April. So yeah, I know. I was gonna surprise you, Eve. I was gonna sneak up behind you and I was gonna yell, "Happy spinning!" So yeah. Yeah, and the other thing actually is that Nora, so my little Nora, she has been begging me to go visit Rebecca and to go up to Nunavut and go to Rankin Inlet. So I said to her, because Rebecca and I are going to organize to go to Maryland Sheep and Wool together. I think it's Maryland Sheep and Wool, and we yeah, we're trying to figure out how we could make that work. But of course, now with everything going virtual for the next year or two, we're going to have to put it on the back burner. But, you know, we'll get there. We will get there. There is a future. So this is not going to be forever, forever. We will have to figure out a way to move forward, even if it means wearing masks on planes indefinitely. We will get there. Thankfully, Nora doesn't mind wearing her face mask. So my mom made a whole bunch and it was just lovely. And the kids have been wearing them and they've been amazing about it. So yeah, we will get there. That's right, Rebecca. We will get there. Marilyn Sheep and Wool, we will get there. What would be so cool is if we could announce it ahead of time, like a year or a year and a half in advance, and say, like, you know, this is what we're going to do, this is where we're going to be, and try to like do something like Marilyn Sheep and Wool, where a lot of people from a lot of places could get, because there's a lot of expats living in the UK and in parts of Europe. There's, you know, and there's a lot of people in North America that could kind of get to a place if we gave you guys enough warning. So we will, let's keep this conversation going in the Slack channel. And then the final pet fiber that I spun was really, really cool, was Angora. So I've had this Angora in my stash for quite a long time. And so this was one little white sample of Angora that I spun. And I actually was really disappointed when I first pulled it off the wheel. I thought it was really inconsistent, really poorly spun. I didn't like it, etc., etc. And then after, it's so white that the camera's having trouble with it. And then after I washed it and finished it, it actually came out like really quite consistent and quite lovely. I was really surprised. It's got a nice, it's very soft. I really understand now why people use it on the cuffs of mittens and on the cuffs of toques and stuff. It turned out really quite well. So I was quite surprised. And then I had some Angora, some more Angora in my stash that I think my friend Diana Twist had given me. And it was a cinnamon color from Cinnabon. Cinnabon, that was the name of the bunny, and it was a cinnamon colored red satin Angora rabbit. And I combined this with Polworth. This is a 60-40. And it came out beautifully, and actually it looks like my hair, to be honest. And this I am really pleased with. So I'm gonna save this for a while. I am gonna skein off a little bit that'll match the size of this sample so that I have the two samples that I'll save. But I actually would really like to knit up a little bit of this just to see what it will be like. Because with the, with the Polworth in there, I think it'd be really interesting. The last thing that I did this week was, oh, bye Miriam, it's good to, or Mari, it was good to see you. I don't know why I keep saying Miriam. Bye Mari, happy looking after Elsie. This was that Meadow yarn that I was talking about that we've been chatting about a lot on the wool stream. So I'm going to share about this little swatch a lot more on the wool stream next time, which is this coming Friday. And this was that Meadow imitation that I did. That has just been so much fun to play with. And I haven't actually checked my gauge yet for the Shoreline vest, which is something, it's a Carrie Bostick Hoge pattern. I've knit it in the past, and I ripped it out in favor of another pattern, but I wanted to knit it again because I'm playing around with drape and texture. So the Shoreline vest, that pattern, I'll just throw it into the show notes for you guys. I was playing around with, I'm not actually sure it's still here, so just give me a second. I'll see if it's still here. Here it is. The pattern that I stumbled across, it was Kat in our community who shared this vest. And I've put the pattern name and everything down below. But you can see the drape on this, and it's got all these short rows at the bottom to make it really swoop down. And it was this yarn that was used for the pattern, and it just really kind of caught my attention. So this is what we've been exploring on the wool stream recently. So I'm hopeful that this will be a good substitute. This pattern, the Shoreline vest, will be a good substitute, because to be honest with you, I really don't want to cast on over 500 stitches and work just a crap ton of short rows. The purling, on the purling side, this is something I have to think about. I don't think that my wrist will do it. So I wanted to find something that was more like a sport weight instead of a fingering with just fewer stitches. So that is how this turned out. And I am going to dye this eventually once I've spun all the yarn. So I carded it up this week, the second 100 grams, because I need, based on my my initial sample, and based on my initial spinning, I need another 100 grams, and for a total of 700 yards for my size. And yeah, I'm gonna hopefully be spinning this week. Fingers crossed, hopefully. We'll see how that goes. I'm at the point now where I feel like I can't say for sure that I'm gonna get spinning time, because my time just keeps getting hijacked. And it's only because of everything that's going on with everyone. Like, we all have these weird, like going to the grocery store takes a bit longer. Meeting up with a friend for a walk takes a bit longer. Like, it's all just, you know, it's a little bit more complicated. So, and just honoring that and giving it time, giving it that space. So, yeah. I'm allergic to rabbits. Oh, I wonder, Deanna, if you would be able to spin Angora. You'll have to see. Yeah. Depends on how clean it is. It's often the dander rather than the fiber that is the problem, but everyone will be different. That's a good point, Becca. I actually found that the alpaca in my Meadow yarn, because I have a sensitivity to alpaca, I actually found that spinning this up and carding it and everything, I was actually okay. And it's only 25% alpaca, so I think that that's maybe why, is that combination with the other fibers is part of the reason why I was actually didn't have an allergic reaction. So yeah. Steaking. You guys are wondering about steaking. Oh, about steaking because of my wrist. So yeah, that's an interesting comment actually, Stan, about steaking. I could steak certain things, but this vest, because of all of the short rows and whatnot, you'd still have to do a lot of purling before you could start working straight and working up the vest. So I do often think about that with patterns. It's one of the reasons why I knit the stone crop pullover instead of the stone crop instead of a cardigan, because I was originally going to do a cardigan with those two yarns when I was looking for a pattern for those two yarns. And that's actually the reason why I ended up doing a pullover, was because I was sort of like, well, maybe I could do the stone crop cardi, which is steeked, or the pullover, and I ended up doing the pullover just to save my wrist. This was okay for my wrist because of the mosaic, because you're slipping stitches, and so that actually worked out quite well. And the shore cardigan ended up being okay. And I think it's because I was working, I seem to be okay with needles between 3.5 millimeters and 4.5 millimeter needles. If it gets any bigger or any smaller, I start to have a problem. So I'm just very aware of that. But it does inform, it does inform some of the projects that I choose. And it doesn't seem to be affected by anything else. It's not affected by my spinning. It's not affected by writing. It's not affected by weaving. Like, it's just that how I hold my wrist when I'm purling. My wrist just breaks down a little bit if I do too much. So it's okay. At least I'm aware of it. So let's talk a little bit about my knits in progress, but we won't spend too much time on these just because they're not hand spun, and I did talk about them last week. So the first project is, and they're actually still full from, my bag is still full from work. I've made really good progress on my pink velvet. So I actually only have 1 more inch on the body before I start the ribbing. So I was really hoping that I could have gotten this onto longer need cables so that I could put it on my dress form with you, but we'll do it next time because I'll be done the ribbing. So I ended up lengthening the body. Pink Velvet is a pattern by Andrea and Mowry. I'll actually show it to you in the in here. So just give me 2 seconds here. Your patience, I just really appreciate your patience. So this is the original Pink Velvet. So you can see it's an Andrea Mowry pattern. It's got the that gorgeous pink color work along the back of the sweater, and then you go into the body. And in the original pattern, when it's modeled on her, I'll just stand up for a second. When it's modeled on her, it's a cropped sweater, and it comes to about here, her natural waist, and she wears it with high-waisted jeans. So because I've knit a couple of crop sweaters now this year for different projects for our 51 yarns and for the Ashford article and for the Wheeler and whatnot, I decided to make this one a bit longer. So I have decided to make this more of like a standard length. So I'm going to knit to 13 inches. So that'll hit my, my hip here. This is my hip bone. It'll hit my hip bone. And then I'm going to add the 2 inches of ribbing to make it a total of about 15 inches in the body instead of 10. So 5 inches longer to make it more of like a standard pullover. And the reason is twofold. First of all, I have a couple of collared tunic length. So tunic is where it comes down to your lower hip. Shirts that I had bought on sale actually a couple of years ago that would look really, really lovely underneath this in the winter when you just want to throw on a couple of layers because it's cold outside, but you don't need a jacket and it's not raining. Big problem here in southwestern British Columbia. And the other thing is to be able to just throw a tank top underneath and throw this on top and not have to worry about whether I'm wearing high-waisted jeans or whether I'm wearing a high-waisted skirt. I can just throw on my jeans, throw on a tank top, throw this on, and just go. So I wanted a really low maintenance knit. So I made it longer. The other thing is I have enough yarn. I have more than enough yarn to knit a full-length sweater. So I thought, you know what? Let's do it. Let's use up the yarn, get it out of my stash. So that is that. And I'm knitting size 2. So I'll end up with a little bit of positive ease. I think I'll end up with a couple of inches of positive ease. I wanted something that was a little bit more relaxed in the yoke. I didn't want it to be tight at all. And I'm really enjoying it. And it gave me a chance to really use up some yardage. I've got, I had a lot of this Jameson Spindrift in the coral colorway. And it was just a really great opportunity to use it up. The dark blue tealy is Shetland, New England. And the colorway I had said in the last show, and I didn't put it in the show notes, but I'm not sure that it's actually still available. I'm not sure. And then the other project that I've been working on is out of my Custom Woolen Mills CVM. It's a 2-ply sock, which is actually not a sock weight or a fingering weight. It's actually more like sport weight. And this is the Sauvebelin. Again, I'll show you the sweater. This is by Jessica Gore. Again, a standard length pullover, about 15 inches from the underarm to the bottom hem. And I worked on it a little bit this week, not a ton, but I did get about an inch done from the underarm. So just kind of a slower knit. I'm not finding that this is particularly quick. And it's not the cabling. I think it's just a slightly stiffer yarn. But granted, I haven't spent a huge amount of time on it. But I feel like this is kind of a bit more of a knit heavy garment. There just feels like a lot of knitting in this. But I'll just work on it in the background. It'll get done when it gets done. I need to skein up another ball of the Custom Woolen Mills, and that'll get me through the rest of the body. So yeah, let me just catch up with chat really quickly. Oh, that's interesting, Bev. You can't comfortably knit on small needles because of her autoimmune and joint issues. Yeah, I guess different. Some of those different issues would really, cause people to have to make changes, to adjust the patterns that you choose and what you choose to do based on what you sort of can and can't do. That's really interesting. Yeah, time is being hijacked. Very much of an issue here. That's great, Eva. Yeah, it's that, everything just takes longer now, right? Like even the other day, we'd ordered groceries because I've been ordering them and picking them up so I don't have to take the kids into the grocery store. And it works really well. It's a great system. It's like, no problems at all. But, it took, we were waiting for them to put them in the back of the car I think we waited for a good 20 minutes by the time they actually came out, and then another 10 minutes to load the car. And the kids are great. Like, we've got audio books that we've been listening to, and they were coloring, and like, it's totally fine. I was knitting, but it just, everything just takes a bit longer. My theme of the year is I'm working on being totally flexible. Yes, it's so true. So jealous of that. Oh, thank you, Maggie. You know what? I feel like I can't finish anything lately either. And the only reason why I got this done actually is because the truck had to go in for some servicing after our trip. We ended up with winter grade diesel in our tank when we were up north, and another ramification of this widespread pandemic. Small communities up north, because they haven't had the traffic through and all of the tourism that they normally would have, and people aren't filling up their ATVs, their boats, all of their toys, carrying gas with them. A lot of the reservoirs at the gas stations up north they weren't emptied completely, so there was still winter diesel in a lot of the in the reservoirs up north, and so our truck registered that there was a problem, and sure enough, when they tested it, it was winter diesel. So when it's hot down here and you've got 35 degrees Celsius, the engine starts to register that there's a problem. So all these like little niggly things that are sort of becoming, that we're learning about as we go, because who would have thought, right, that the reservoirs up north in these small communities didn't get emptied like they normally would. And so then this winter diesel is laced with summer diesel, and it's just really, really interesting. So GM was really good about it, and they actually didn't charge us, but it's just all these things that are we don't even realize we're going to be affected by. So that's how I finished this, actually, is because we were waiting for the truck to be done. Do you find yourself turning more to pullovers rather than cardigans now? It's funny you would ask that, Eve, because yes, the last number of projects that I've knit have been pullovers. I think part of it is I've been really seeking simplicity and comfort, and I don't know if it's because of sort of just the way that this year is unfolding, the year that I've had, like the past year since this time last year. Because our challenges kind of started in May, June of 2019 all the way through and never really stopped. And it was kind of just one thing after another. And sometimes some stages in life were just like that. That I sort of have found myself very much turning to clothing that's comfortable, that's baggier, that has lots of ease, that I don't feel like I'm constantly adjusting and trying to fit properly. And so yeah, I feel like I've started to choose things that are low maintenance, so like this, my short cardigan, I was saying last weekend when we were streaming, like it's just so easy to wear. And I think in some ways sometimes pullovers can be like that. It doesn't matter what you're wearing underneath, like it does with a cardigan. You just pull them on, throw a shawl on, and you're good to go. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, totally stepped away from some kinds of projects. I've noticed my knitting has slowed down a lot, and I'm desperate to learn new skills almost. I hear you, Kelly. I'm kind of feeling like that too. Like I was really craving a more technical knit, but I also didn't want it to be too hard. So that's why I chose the cabled sweater and a colorwork sweater, but not a really complicated colorwork. I just thought, like, if these take quite a long time, I'm just going to embrace that and go with it. Yeah, socks have been my simple comfort knit. I know how I like to knit them, and I don't have to think very much. That's very, yeah, I hear you, Deanna. I think we're all looking for that. I feel like there's this sense of comfort and looking for familiarity and just being very gentle to ourselves and just showing ourselves some compassion. Yeah. It's interesting how we all react. I think we should start a thread. COVID made me do it. Totally, Megan. We should totally start that in the Ravelry group. The things that you've done because of COVID. Yeah. So everybody's saying the same thing. Like, knitting's really slowed down. Yeah. I've really been finding that I've been sitting with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and just kind of, if I get 1 or 2 rounds done, that's enough. Whereas before I felt like, it was like, sitting down to knit was, not that it had to be fast or that I had to really get anything done, but it didn't necessarily have to also be relaxing. I could just sit and knit and, like, I didn't really think of it. Whereas now it's like, you know, sitting with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and knitting, and just kind of, you know, and not knitting super quickly, just kind of, you know, just knitting, just being very gentle, very quiet. Yeah, I think we all have been really needing that. That would actually be a really fun thread, a positive spin on the whole craziness. Totally, totally, Kelly. All right, I'm going to say goodbye. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Have a great week. We've got the Wool Stream coming up, or the Wool Circle, sorry, it's not called the Wool Stream anymore. The Wool Circle coming up this coming Friday. It will be at 9:30 Pacific Daylight Time. I have dropped the kids off at camp, and then I'll be back to do that with you guys. So for those who are part of those tiers on Patreon, please be sure to tune in. And then we're back here next weekend, next Sunday at 8:15 Pacific Daylight Time for our live stream with our community. And then afterwards at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the Queries and Explorations thread will be meeting. So I look forward to sitting with you guys and chatting about, we're actually going to be doing measurements next week. We're going to be looking at measuring our bodies and measuring our, for a sweater, for a sweater spin and a sweater knit. So for those who are in Queries and Explorations, that's what we'll be working on. And we'll also be looking at woolen plying. So that's coming up next weekend for that group. Until next time, happy spinning, happy knitting. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye, everyone.